Welcome back, students. This week I'm going to continue my discussion on the Texas legislature, and we're going to start talking about committees. Committees are very important because there are three basic purposes of the Texas legislature. First one is simply to create laws. This is their main function. Second one is appropriations. Appropriations is just the legal term for funding different agencies or whatever, funding bills. Oversight. What this means is that the Texas legislature has oversight of the various agencies that help run the Texas government. Oversight, they're supposed to be able to call witnesses and make sure that these agencies are operating hopefully at peak level, and if they're not, to see what kind of adjustments need to be made. Things can't be done in the Texas legislature until the legislature breaks down into something called committees. Committees are just smaller bodies. Might have anywhere between 10 and 20 people, depending on what the committee is about. But committees serve as a division of labor. All of the real work in Texas, in the Texas legislature, is done by committees. Committees allow bills to be passed to those who have expertise in an area so that they can study the bill and see if any changes need to be made. Committees act as little legislatures. Once a bill is passed to a committee, this is where the real work begins. When a bill is assigned to a committee, the committee can hold public hearings. They can call witnesses for both sides of the bill. And I mean, witnesses can come testify for or against the bill. They have debates on the bill, and they can mark up or they can amend the bill. So by marked up, I mean that bills can be rewritten. These markups can be minor changes, or they can substantially alter a bill. Most bills do not leave a committee in the original form they came in, as the original bill was written when it arrived. Why not? There can be a couple of reasons for this. The first reason a bill would need to be marked up is simply because it's a general idea. I have something that I want done, but I'm not sure the proper way or the best way to go about it. So if I was a Texas legislature, I would write a bill, hope it was submitted to the correct committee, and then let the committee take care of business. They can say, oh, this is good, oh, this is bad. Let's change this to make it more effective. The second reason that we might see that a bill is marked up, a bill is changed, is to gain bipartisan support. And what I mean by bipartisan support is that it gains support from both Democrats and Republicans. It might mean, or this might need to occur because if you're a Democrat and you write a bill and you're the minority on your committee, you might need to change it so that some of the Republicans on the committee agree with the bill. They also think it's a good bill. So therefore, they will vote for it along with the Democrats on the committee to go ahead and move it out of the committee and up into whatever legislative body you're in. Committees are often used to kill bills. This can be done in a couple of different ways. The first is by having the presiding officer assign a bill to a committee, and this committee has no idea what this bill is, and they will not act on it. The presiding officer is very, very strong. One of their main powers is they get to assign bills to committees. So if the presiding officer does not like you, we will see them use their power of not necessarily retaliation, though that can be the choice, but we can see them use their power for you to not be successful. For instance, if you write a bill, you come from a district that is heavily into agriculture, you create a bill that's going to benefit your district, that's written to benefit the agricultural community in your district. Well, the presiding officer says, you know what, I don't like you. So he takes your bill and he sends it to the committee that deals with highways, transportation, higher education. Why would he do this? Why wouldn't he send it to the agricultural committee? Remember what I said. He doesn't like you. He doesn't want to see you succeed. So by sending your bill to a committee that has no idea what it is, what does the Transportation Committee know about agriculture? What does the Committee on Higher Education know about agriculture? They don't know anything. So what are they going to do with your bill? They're not going to do a dang thing with it. They're going to let it sit there. They're not even going to look at it. This process is called pigeonholing. You know, it goes to a committee, doesn't know what to do on it, or doesn't know what to do with it, doesn't know what it is, so they never do any work on it. The end of the legislative session, it dies. So this is pigeonholing. It's sent to a committee with the intent that the committee is not going to do any work on it, or that they don't do any work on it. Another way of killing a bill is a process called tagging. Tagging is a senatorial right or procedure. Any senator is allowed to tag a bill, and this can delay hearing on a bill for up to 48 hours. What happens is a senator will tag a bill, says you can't work on this for 48 hours. And that's simply the process. Any work done within 48 hours, before the tag is up, is void. So if the committee does any work on it, it doesn't count. They have to go back. If I tag a bill, and I tag a bill right now, say 2 o'clock one afternoon, the Senate works on, the Senate committee works on it tomorrow morning. Well, that work is null and void. They can't work on it till 48 hours from the time that I tag it. How would this kill a bill? It's very simple. Do you think that most of the work, most of the bills approved, come at the beginning, the middle, of the end of the session? Most of them come at the end of the session, the last 2 or 3 weeks. So what happens if we have 2 weeks left and a bill's getting ready to come up for a discussion? 2 weeks left, we have 14 days. I say, okay, as a senator, I tell the Senate, the committee chairman, the head of the committee, I want to tag this bill. So they can't work on it for 2 days. So once my tag is up, there's only 12 days left to work on this bill. Well, then I have a friendly senator who is sympathetic to my cause, and they say, you know what, I want to tag the same bill. Well, so now suddenly this bill is tagged for 2 more days, and we're down from 12 days to 10 days. Well, after that second tag is up, we have a third senator come up and say, you know what, I want to tag this bill. Well, suddenly we're down from 10 days to 8 days. Now, each senator is only allowed to tag a bill once, but if they make a concerted effort, if they make a concentrated effort, and they tag team it, they can effectively kill a bill at the end of the legislative period by making sure there's not enough time to discuss it, debate it in committee, and even let it go into the main chamber for a vote. Just because a bill gets to a committee and the committee is not working on it, there's every indication that the bill is going to die, This does not necessarily mean it is. There is one other option to get the bill out of committee. This other option is called a discharge petition. The discharge petition is a way to rescue bills from being pigeonholed in committees. A discharge petition means that a bill is brought out of committee and onto the floor for consideration without a report from the committee. And usually a discharge petition is filed without the cooperation of the leadership of the committee. Why would we not see the use of the discharge petition very often? Why are our elected officials content to let bills die in committee? It is not used very often because it is seen as a threat to the privilege, to the ability of the whole committee system. And what I mean by this is, if you're an elected official, let me ask this. If you're an elected official, do you want to vote on everything that you can? Do you want to vote on every bill that's filed? No, you don't. Well, but Mr. Smith, that's my job. Yes, I understand it's your job. And what you have to remember is you want to keep your job. So what happens if you're called to vote on a very touchy social subject? Abortion, immigration, same-sex marriage, something like that. And it's something that your constituents, your district that you represent, is fairly split on. You know, it might be, yes, they favor abortion rights 51 to 49%. They want something done about illegal immigration 51 to 49%. If it is a topic that is really controversial and really divides your district, your constituency, the people that vote for you, you don't want to vote on this. Simply because if it's something that is that close, 51%, 52%, even 55%, that means that if you vote to support what the majority want, that small majority, you are aggravating a very high percentage of the minority. If it's 52 that support, 48 oppose, this means that you have aggravated 48% of your community, of your constituency. You do a couple of minor mistakes, and if these 48% don't like you, if you lose 3% of the 52% that voted for you, that support you, guess what? Suddenly 51% of the people don't like you, and only 49% of the people support you. So your favorability, when they come to reelect you, you're under 50%. You are not going to get reelected. So you don't want to vote on everything that you can, the hot button issues, the controversial topics. If you can avoid it, you don't want to vote on these at all. But just because you don't want to vote, and this is a second reason that you might not use a discharge petition. And we're going to talk about retaliation here as a second reason. You don't want to vote on it. You know it's a touchy subject. You know that whichever way you vote is going to hurt you in your next reelection. Well, what if you have some other senator or some other House member says, I don't care, I want it voted on. And they file this discharge petition. Eventually, karma occurs. Eventually, there's going to be some committee action, some legislative bill in a committee that this other person does not want to vote on. It may be the next legislative session. It may be 2 years later. It might be the legislative session 4 years later. But the person who was forced to cast that first vote, they have long memories, and our elected officials have long memories. And they may say, this person doesn't want to vote on this topic. he doesn't want to vote on this bill, or he or she doesn't want to vote on this bill. Yet 4 years ago, they filed a discharge petition to make me vote on a bill I didn't want to vote on. I'm going to get them back. I'm going to put them in an uncomfortable position. I'm going to file a discharge petition and make them cast a vote that they don't want to cast. You know, guys, I'm sorry to say this actually does happen in the Texas legislature. I've had students say, that sounds so high schoolish. Sometimes that's the way it works. Retaliation is a fear. Let's talk about the calendar for a few minutes. The calendar is used for controlling the flow of legislation from committees to the floor of the chamber. So it's used for controlling the flow of legislation from committees to either the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate. So, there are 4 types of House calendars. The first is the daily House calendar. This is the most important calendar. It contains a list of new bills and resolutions scheduled by the Committee on Calendars for consideration by the House. Most important, it tells you what that daily business, what's going to occur that day. You need to know this, so you need to know if, as an elected official, you need to be there to support a bill, to oppose a bill, if there's going to be a vote, so you can be there and vote and be seen. If you're favoring a bill, so you can speak in favor of it. This is why we need the daily House calendar. This calendar must be distributed to the members 36 hours before the House may consider those measures on the calendar. If it's a special session, it only has to be submitted to the members or given to the members 24 hours ahead of time. Excuse me, I did not mean to do that. Hold on. The second calendar is the Supplemental House calendar. This may contain A, measures that were passed to a third reading on the previous day. What happens in Texas is if we pass a bill, or to pass a bill, when the bill is initially filed, a brief synopsis is read. When the bill comes up for a vote in front of the House or in front of the Senate, this is the second reading, the entire bill is read so that they know what they're voting on. They vote on it. If it passes, by law, we must have a third reading. The day after it passes, they must read the bill again. So that's A. B, measures on the daily House calendar for a previous day that were not reached for consideration. So we didn't get to it. We accidentally didn't get to it. It got postponed. C, measures on the daily House calendar for the current day. So we're going to see if anything was added. D, postponed business from a previous day. So business we didn't get to on a previous day, we intentionally didn't get it. We postponed it to a later date. Or E, a notice to call from the table, a measure laid on the table subject to call on a previous day. So something that was going to be discussed a previous day. This calendar must be distributed 2 hours before the House convenes. The third type of calendar is the local consent and resolutions calendar. So the local, consent, and resolutions calendar. This will contain a list of local or non-controversial bills scheduled by the Committee on Local and Consent Calendars for consideration by the House. This calendar must be distributed 48 hours before the listed measures may be considered. The last type of calendar is the congratulatory and memorial calendar. This calendar simply contains a list, of congratulatory and memorial resolutions and motions scheduled by the Committee on Rules and Resolutions for consideration by the House. This calendar must be distributed 24 hours before the measures may be considered. So while there are 4 different types of calendars that the House uses, the most important one is the daily House calendar. The Senate calendar. The Senate is much more civilized in how they do things. The Senate has one calendar which bills may be placed on. Senate rules state all bills must be discussed in the chronological order they are placed on the calendar. So what this means is that SB 1, Senate Bill 1, must be discussed and voted on before Senate Bill 2. We get rid of 1, we can go to Senate Bill 2. SB 2 must be discussed and voted on before we can move on to Senate Bill 3. However, here's the catch. Senate Bill 1 is what is called a blocking bill. The first bill placed on the Senate calendar is called a blocking bill. It usually deals with a proposed horticultural change. You know, the trees or the flowers around the state capitol. Maybe something to do with Big Bend National Park. Something like that. Whatever it deals with, it will never, I repeat, it will never be considered. That's why it's called a blocking bill. Well, if this is a blocking bill, if they will never discuss Senate Bill 1, and Senate Bill 1 has to be taken care of before they move to Senate Bill 2, how do they get anything accomplished? We go with something that's called a suspension of the rule. Suspension of the rule is simply the process which allows a bill to be taken off the calendar out of chronological order and placed on the Senate floor for debate. That means we can take Senate Bill 2. If we pass a suspension of the rule, we can discuss Senate Bill 2 without discussing Senate Bill 1. We can discuss Senate Bill 7 without discussing Senate Bill 1 through 6. To obtain a suspension of the rule, 2/3 of the Senate must vote to take or to suspend the rule and allow the bill to come to the floor. This requirement can often cause a bill to die on the calendar because there's not enough votes to move it to the floor. We might not have, I say we need 2/3. This would be 21 out of the 31 senators to vote. So that's suspension of the rule. Once again, remember how I said earlier, you don't want to vote on everything that comes up. There might be something that is highly volatile that your constituents feel strongly about. If it's split evenly, you don't want to take a side. I've enclosed a newspaper article explaining the suspension of the rule. For the first time in the Senate, it used to be a 2/3 vote. So you would need 21 of 31 senators to approve the suspension of the rule. For the legislative session we had for the legislative year 2015, the Lieutenant Governor, remember the Lieutenant Governor runs the Senate, the Lieutenant Governor amended the suspension of the rule. He changed the suspension of the rule. He changed that number from 21 to 19. What was the big deal about dropping it down to 20 from 21 to 19? Guess how many Republican senators? Our Lieutenant Governor was Republican. Guess how many Republican senators we had in the Senate? That's right, we had 19. If it was at 21, he needs all 19 Republican senators and 2 Democratic senators to side with him. But if he changes it to 19, he only needs the Republican Party senators to side with him. I'm going to talk about the floor. The floor is where members of whichever house meet, or whichever chamber, I don't like to use the term house, whichever chamber meet to debate, amend, vote on, enact, pass, or even defeat legislation. Let's start off with the House floor. It doesn't matter if we talked about the House first or the Senate first, but let's talk about the House. The legislators who are attempting to get a bill passed are known as the floor leaders, or if it's an individual, the floor leader, when their bill is up on the floor. They will stand up in front of their colleagues and explain the points of the bill, answer questions, and in general, speak in favor of the bill. When it comes time to vote on the bill, the vote is cast and recorded. A recorded vote is a vote in which the name of the voter is recorded and how they voted for the bill. Yea or nay, for or against. House members are allowed to vote yes, no, or present. For a number of years, we Texans were doing this wrong. We would simply have a voice vote. What I mean by this is, it'd be a voice vote or a show of hands. There was no official record of who voted for what, if they supported it, if they didn't. So your representative could come home and say, guys, I'm sorry, I tried to get it passed, I supported it, I voted for it. We just couldn't do it, maybe next time. The district says, man, we know you tried. We appreciate it. You did a good job. Did we really know if our representative or if our senator voted for it? No, we didn't. So finally, in 2007, the state passed Proposition 11, which required recorded votes. What this meant was that there was actually a voting record. We could see how the individuals voted. Did they vote yes? Did they vote no? This was actually better for the citizens of Texas because we could make sure that our elected officials, our elected representatives, were actually voting the way we wanted them to. Point of order, I want to give a brief definition. A point of order is simply a formal question concerning the legitimacy of a legislative process. A successful point of order can result in the postponement or the defeat of legislation. So, for example, if I want to raise a point of order, if I'm a senator and I tagged a bill, was any work done during this tagging period? Because remember, any work done makes that null and void. If it's proven that there's a point of order, that work was done during a time when it was not allowed to be, it sends the bill all the way back to committee. So it has to go back there and start over. So depending on when this point of order arises, if it's near the end of the session, this can also successfully kill a bill. Actually, before I go to the floor of the Senate, I want to go back to the floor of the House. And there's something I need to explain. On the House floor, you have, I was saying that you have discussion. Our presiding officers, the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor, these are very powerful positions when it comes to legislative stuff. They get to decide which committee your bill is going to go to. So if you're in the House and you file a bill, the Speaker of the House can send it to the correct committee. They can send it to the Transportation Committee, or else they can send it to the Education Committee. Same way with the Lieutenant Governor. These are very powerful positions. They also have the ability to award chairmanships, to put people in charge of these committees, and they have the ability to place people on committees. We see a bunch of retaliatory actions done in our government. The lieutenant governor does not like you if you did not support something he wanted supported. He may steer your bill to the wrong committee. He may put you on a committee that you know nothing about, that does nothing for your constituencies or for your constituency. If you don't bring home anything good, if you don't bring home any money, or you don't supply anything for your constituency, they're not going to elect you. Same way with the House. The House Speaker. The Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor get to dictate. They get to recognize people who want to testify for a bill or against a bill. So if they don't like you, they don't have to recognize you. If you want to support a bill that they don't like, they don't have to recognize you. So it's very, very high schoolish. I think I used that term earlier. I've had students in the past use it. But the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker of the House, very, very powerful positions. They are the presiding officers. Very, very powerful. One of the things I needed to discuss when we were talking about the House is when we have the actual discussion of a bill. What happens, a bill comes out of committee, and this is in the House and in the House only. The committee approves a bill. If the committee does not approve a bill, the bill stays in committee, it dies. It doesn't come out for a vote. But in the House of Representatives, the committee approves the bill. The bill will then go to the Calendar Committee. The Calendar Committee will schedule a day for debate, a day that we get to discuss and vote on this bill. However, there's additions. In the House of Representatives, the Calendar Committee, they get to add stipulations. They get to add a time limit. We'll discuss this bill for 10 minutes, for 15 minutes, for 30 minutes, for an hour. They may not add any time. It may be just a straight up vote. No time for discussion. They get to add what's called an open rule or a closed rule. And this has to do with, can amendments be attached to the bill? In a closed rule, no amendments can be attached to the bill. In an open rule, the House members can attach additional amendments to the bill. So very powerful. Our presiding officers are very powerful, and in the House, and in the House alone, this is very important, you have the Calendar Committee. They get to put a time limit on discussion, on debate of a bill. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's go back to the floor of the Senate. The floor of the Senate operates much like the House, or the House floor. Once a bill is brought to the floor, you would have debate, although you actually do not have as much debate as you do in the House. Let me state, to pass a bill, what does it take to pass a bill? What percent? 50% plus 1 takes a simple majority. And this applies to both chambers. This applies to the House. 50% plus 1 has to approve. In the Senate, 50% plus 1 has to approve. Why would we have less debate in the Senate than we would in the House? Yes, true. There are less members. So that's one possible reason. But actually what I want you to think about is the reason we have less debate in the Senate is, how does a bill get to the floor of the Senate? Remember, the first bill is a blocking bill. It's never going to be discussed. So we have to have the suspension of the rule. How many votes do we need for suspension of the rule? Going to be anywhere between 19 and 21. How many senators do we have? We only have 31. Remember, we talked about that last week, 31 senatorial districts. So for 31 to have a majority, we need 16. Yet we need a minimum of 19 senators to pass a suspension of the rule. So we are already getting a majority of votes to even bring it onto the floor for discussion before we vote on it. If we get the suspension of the rule, if enough people say, let's bring it to the floor for a vote, we've already surpassed the majority needed. Now, just because we have the suspension of the rule does not mean that we don't have any debate. In the Texas Senate, we see a filibuster. For those of you who have taken U.S. government, you should have heard this term before. The filibuster it means unlimited debate. The filibuster can be used to delay a bill. Usually the speaker is hoping to elicit a compromise. They will filibuster a bill and hope that the author of the bill will take the bill off the floor for consideration. They will come up and say, what do you need? What do we have to do to get you to allow this bill go through so that we can vote on it? That's the main purpose. Now, I said that the Texas Senate has a filibuster like the U.S. Senate. However, it's not exactly like the U.S. Senate. In the U.S. Senate, the filibuster, if I'm a senator, I can get up, I can say, I don't like this bill. I can tell you why I don't like this bill. Then I can do something else. I can go read a book. We've had senators read the phone books, read the Bibles. We had a senator a couple of years ago, a U.S. senator, read Green Eggs and Ham. Once I get done, I'm tired, my voice is giving away, I can pass off to a sympathetic senator who can take over the filibuster for me. And we can go on and on and on until the bill is pulled or until we vote for something called cloture. Cloture, and this is, remember, I'm still on the federal level. Cloture is a vote. 60 senators have to vote to end the filibuster. If cloture occurs, they're basically saying, sit down, shut up, we're going to vote. Well, in the Texas Senate, we have the filibuster, but our rules are more strict. They're more streamlined. The Texas senator is allowed to filibuster as long as they are able. However, it can only be one person. They cannot pass off to a sympathetic senator. They cannot get off topic. I'd said we'd have the U.S. senator say, I don't like it, then read us books. No, the point of their filibuster, the senator has to stay on topic, has to continue talking about the bill. The senator can't sit down, lay down. They can't even lean on something. If they do this, the filibuster is over. Nobody else can pick it up. The filibuster is over, and the Senate will vote.